All right, everybody. Very happy to announce the next session, our second one, High-Tech Vision, Architecture in the Realm of Advanced Technology. And I'd like to introduce Andrew Tulen, Senior Principal of Populous. Welcome. Thank you. And then Theresa Sheils, the Co-Managing Director, Co-Regional Managing Principal, for Gensler. Welcome. And our moderator, Suneet Langar. Enjoy, everybody. Come on in, a few in the back. Come on in.
Hi, everyone. Our first panel discussion of the day is going to be about architecture and technology and how they intersect with each other. Technology and data, big data, how they're informing the design process and how they're informing and reimagining design and architectural practice as we think about it. What I want to start with today is data. No conversation about technology can be had without talking about the potential of data. You both are working at different scales. You're working from, interior design to the building scale as well as to urban design and landscape, right? And different kinds of data can be tracked and identified and generated and analyzed. And the sheer volume of data that you sometimes have access to today is staggering. I want you to think of an example or an anecdote where data played a critical role in how you saw a space or how you saw a project and how it completely even changed your perception of how people were using a particular space, or where it had a very significant impact on ideation and iteration.
I can start. So, I think I'll give two quick examples. One, I think you go into your work with, I don't want to say a preconceived notion, but you think you know what the outcome is going to be, right? And I think a lot of times when you get the pure data, like when you understand through a tool maybe that you can see the sunlight, how the sunlight works and what your expectations would be about shading and things like that, it's very different than what maybe your first intuition would be. And then I think the other thing I wanted to mention, and we talked a bit before this in our earlier conversations, is sometimes we don't know what data is interesting to our clients, right? So we've created all these tools, and we're using them for our own progression of our clients' work. But then our clients see it and they say, aha, this would be amazing if you could just tell me how to do X. And so what we're finding a lot of times, and I'm sure you are too, Andrew, is that we're bringing data to the table, but then that data brings you to a new step and a new stage where maybe you're pivoting and you don't need more of that data. You need to take it into a different direction.
100% agree, Theresa. I think the thing there is that design is an iterative process, and sometimes extracting that data, taking it too quickly to the table, is a risk that we all face. It can send us off in some very odd directions, and also it can actually set expectations and aspirations higher or differently to the narrative that we as designers really need to be controlling. So I think, 100%, Theresa, that's right.
So in the question there then is, especially as you're engaging with clients and their needs and their requirements and their expectations, and as like you said, it changes the feedback and the expectations from the client's end also throughout the process. Sometimes earlier in the process, they're expecting something that's stunning already, which is supposed to be the outcome, and you have to get there slowly and incrementally, but they just want to see it right at that stage. But do you also find that with so much data at your hands, which that you can present to your clients at different stages of the process, it also leads to some degree of paralysis in decision making from their end, because there's so much data to present and to grasp and to understand for you and your teams as well as on the client's end. Do you find indecision throughout that process then is a little more now than it were, let's say, with human resources alone?
Maybe not so much indecision, but more people trying to make decisions, thinking that they're making these decisions from a very informed place from their efforts on all of the tools that are available to everyone these days. And I think that as a result of that, it can slow down the actual design process that has the integrity, because you do spend some time, I find, trying to almost disprove or redirect some of the narratives that might be coming. Theresa, you mentioned AI and visual AI tools being the next Pinterest. And I thought that was a really good way to put it, because people can actually explore a little more deeper now. Our clients are becoming more and more tech savvy and more sophisticated. And the pace at which these things can be turned around means that we need to be working faster, but at the same time facing the challenges of giving our designs the integrity and thorough thinking that we would normally do.
I think what also then comes into play is this idea of creativity as a genuine human trait, and how we're driving it out of the process with, again, so much data at play. In your practice, do you see, how do you sort of reconcile that, how do you bring in the human element while you're engaging with so much data and so much technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were talking previously, someone can come to the table with ideas, like you said Pinterest, or I said Pinterest, but that doesn't mean it works, right? There's so many aspects to an image to translate to actual built work for the experience that you will be having in this space that you cannot possibly get from an image. And so there is so much thinking that has to go into the images. And yes, can we produce what I just showed in a 2-second clip in a day? Yes, but there's so much thinking that has to come before that. Or there's so much thinking to reproof and to draw out from the client what the needs are and what the program is and what the experience wants to be for the people in the space that has to go into that. So anyone can, pretty much anyone can create that if they, wanted to dig into it, right? I can't. But I'm sure, clients have come to us with, an idea. I put some prompts in, I got this rendering, right? But that's where the creativity really comes in. That's where the knowledge and the asking and the strategy and the thinking that needs to happen to make this truly built, beautiful, amazing work.
I think that taps into this question of authorship and bias that's sometimes inbuilt in some of these technological tools. And because the data that even these tools have access to and that they are crawling for insights sometimes can be misunderstood, can be misinterpreted. And do you then begin to see that architecture or design without the human intervention at each of these stages to drive it becomes meaningless to a certain degree?
I think it will lose its character, and there'll be a level of generic output that we'll see that will come from that, if that should happen. We're of the same school here that we know that we can't release that human creativity and that human touch to what we're doing. And it's a difficult question, because the pace at which things happen, the life cycles of buildings, the quick returns that people need are in direct conflict at times with some of the human things. We work at a bit of a slower rate, right? So we need to be continually convincing and showing our clients that we need that. And it's a difficult thing to do, especially when they're coming to us with designs that they did last night.
I think the other thing is when you have humans driving the process, right? And you also have technology at play, how do you then instill and create systems that do not give you generic results, that do not churn out things that could be of any firm at any point? And I think it's something that is thrown at, as an argument, it's thrown at AI, for instance, all the time, that the results it gives you are quite generic, like you said, right? And because you're crawling the internet, or it's become the Pinterest, like you said. So how do you then find a way to integrate design values and some unique voice and vision and like design manifestos into these processes for each of your firms? Then you're working with fairly complex projects across geographies. Is there a way that firms can find a way to integrate their own thinking, their own unique brand of how they work with clients and their processes into these systems?
Yeah, I mean, we have to, right? I think you mentioned, that, and I think neither of our firms necessarily has a style, right? But that you said, if I just saw your project, Theresa, and your project, Andy, I'm not sure if I would know it was from Gensler or Populous. And I said, that's true. But I don't think you could put my project on Andy's site and Andy's site on my project and still have it have any meaning. And so it can't just be wallpaper. And what brings it to be built work and architecture and experiential is all the other components that go into design. It is, what are the expectations? What are the client's needs? What are the site constraints? What are the goals, right? You were talking about the fan experience, right? We were talking about that too, and with your stadium, all these things have to be incorporated into that and are really driving what the solutions become. And could you have multiple solutions for those? Of course you could, right? But that's where it brings the personal team, right? The personal client's needs, and the group that's making the decisions. If Andy came with his clients, a different client, and the same brief, they would come up with something different than I would come with my client with their needs in a same brief but different needs, right? And there would be two very different projects. If we both threw prompts in that said, make me a 500-meter tower that has a lot of greenery in it, we might get the same prompts. We probably would. And then even if you're doing that, you start to iterate what the needs are of the client. That's what that thinking changes what your outcome is.
I think we also need to be careful on the question of, I want a better expression than this, but baking in a style to what we do. I like to think that the style is a secondary kind of thing, and that architecture needs to be responsive to all the things Theresa mentioned, plus socio-economic conditions, all sorts of things. And just to bake a style in for no other reason than it's a style is probably a little bit negative as well, I think, to the outcomes. So, does the machine learn your style over time and understand how your inputs might be extrapolated or interpolated? We'll see. But certainly at the moment, from all of us, anyone using these tools, you can see that it is hard to identify where they might have come from.
The next thing I want to get into is management of practice in the realm of some of these technologies coming in, and you're constantly having to innovate and learn and train large teams spread over different parts of the world, in different offices, in different contexts. So I of course understand, because we saw some of these tools that, for instance, your team is producing, and I'm guessing there's a different department there who's actually working on this simultaneously and then feeding into the design flow. But what about smaller practices and smaller setups who do not necessarily have the financial bandwidth to actually invest in these in a more regular manner? What recommendations would you have for studios of 20 or 50 people who are just starting out, but they have to keep pace with what's happening around the world? Otherwise, they'll just be pushed out of the market. So what can they do to ensure that they're keeping pace and they're also dealing with client expectations, which similar clients are walking into their rooms and asking them for similar things at that sort of pace. So how do they keep up?
It's a really good question. I think it has to revolve around focus, actually. Not to be limiting, but at the same time, understand how you can make an impact with the numbers that you have. You need to be on top of all of the current technologies, but I think you need to be selective about what you want to get out of them. There's no way that you can keep up with everything that's happening. Theresa shared with us a whole suite of amazing metrics and systems that are using big data to analyse outcomes. And that comes from a huge database, being able to dedicate teams. Tell me if I'm wrong, Theresa. And
it's a smaller team, but yes, a team.
but there's dedicated efforts that go into producing that amazing outcome. And I think that architects, young architects, smaller architectural practices need to keep their eye on that. They need to choose a focus and not lose the eye of the whole game, which is architecture at the end of the day, and what they really want to be doing.
Yeah, I also think, a small firm can be much more nimble, right? If there's only 10 of you, if there's only 20 of you, if one guy says, let's go this way, it's easy to send 20 people this way, right? If one guy's in a corner trying something out, he says, hey, check this out. The other 9 people probably haven't studied it or checked it out or even know how to do it. So everybody can jump on the bandwagon, or, it's not like we're going to get Andy's 2,500 or Gensler's 6,500 to jump on the same study that somebody did in the, Nebraska office or Kansas City office, right? And say, okay, we're all going this way. So I think small firms have this ability to be very nimble. And I also think the scale of clients that they have at that size maybe aren't looking for understanding what the metrics are for their interior layouts from one space to another, because they have to recreate the one person to 125 square feet across their portfolio.
That also leads me to my next question, which is the kind of talent that you have access to from schools and colleges today, and how do you see architectural labor and the job scene changing? What skill sets and people do you think are going to become redundant, and what do schools need to do today to ensure that the talent that they're churning out today is in alignment with what the needs of the market are and what the needs of the industry are, and what skills are critical to the profession today?
Yeah, I think the schools are, for the most part, right, every school's program is very different, right? I know there's a school that's doing classical architecture in pencil. Not sure that that's future thinking, but that's a university's program and there's people interested in it. But every school has a different program. But I think the thing that I think collectively in general is that they are far enough away looking at technology already. And what I think needs to happen along with the technology is the thinking and the process, and pulling out actual processes and plans and thinking that can back up what you can do with technology, because technology is still the tool. And if you aren't able to figure out how to process the outcome or understand the program, you will get something, but it's not going to be the best outcome you could possibly get. So I think that we need that thinking to go along with the technology that I think is in quite a great direction, and probably farther ahead as young people than a lot of firms are as a firm.
It's super exciting to see how far it can go. And like you say, university students now are just more and more eager to dive deeper and deeper into what technology can do to help this along. But I do think, and maybe this is a little bit old school in thinking, but good leadership and mentoring from some of the stalwarts within an office is super critical. And obviously that's a cyclical thing, and the next thing will come along in 10 years' time, and maybe the cycle changes and there's different people doing that mentoring. But I think it's naive to think you can just dive straight in. You need to understand the bones of what it is you're trying to achieve at the end of the day, which is a built product. And that, or maybe it isn't a built product, but nonetheless, there needs to be an understanding of that. There needs to be an understanding of project management and how to communicate your designs, how to get things across in a well thought through and timely manner in a process, and how to engage with everyone else in that process as well, because it's not just to put your earphones on, jump in and come up with something amazing. It is a collaborative process, and there's a lot of people in that picture.
Clients, right? Oh, clients, they take their part of that?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, you don't have that in school, right?
Yeah. And I think that the process of training also, whether it's at school or whether that's in practice, is also changing. And I remember what you spoke when we were discussing this earlier, this idea of a sage sitting in every architectural office, and how that knowledge can be fed into the system. And this system can actually be leveraged to some degree. Why don't you tell us about that story quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea, right? There's an engineering firm that's taking the folks that are ready for retirement, and they're saying, we'd like you to really focus some time on answering the questions that the teams have via email. And they're doing this to collect all the huge knowledge over these sages, for lack of a better words, careers over the last 40 years. I think that's one use of technology, but it's a great one, right? Because you can't call up somebody who's not there anymore. You can't go over to their desk, but they've got this great knowledge. But I think one of the things we were talking about is you've got to also then take that as your starting point. Then you have to reproof it. Then you have to take it to your own problem, which is different than the problem that person was trying to solve. So this isn't the answer. It's like a nice encyclopedia, right? It's a good place to start, and then you need to do your own investigation and your own research. But I think there's lots of different ways we can start to investigate the ways that we're not even using technology right now.
What I want to end with is a much broader concern about how technology impacts us as human beings. And, I want to get into Andrew's company's tagline, which is sort of bringing people together. And I mean, especially since the pandemic, when people were sort of shut in their homes. And today you have access to so much at your fingertips inside the comfort of your homes. You can watch movies, why do you need to go to a theater anymore? So what does it take today to get people outside their homes? And what do you think, I mean, especially since, both of you presented some projects where we can see virtual reality and digital experiences at play. What do you think is the future of human engagement and community in society, and what role does architecture have to play in that?
Great question. I think during the pandemic, as a business, we were slightly concerned about what that might be, what that might mean. Being close to people again was kind of a scary thought. It turned out to be quite the opposite for us, and we had a really successful time through that pandemic. And since that pandemic, we've seen people coming together more and more and more. It's a kind of herd mentality. People are people. People want to be with people. And, I love an armchair as much as the next person. I've got a big TV. Why would I go anywhere? And I think that there's just nothing that can beat being around other people with like-minded interests, looking at a certain event or a certain experience. And what we need to do, or our responsibility, is to make sure that we continue to elevate that experience through great fan experiences that start right from that seat, actually reaching right back into how you get your ticket, how you book your ticket, how you get to a venue, how do you make things easy, comfortable, how do you make things financially viable for the clients, and have, to keep putting these events on. We saw Taylor Swift come through Singapore a few months ago, or a couple of months ago, and that was just insane. It coined a new a new term, Swiftonomics. People want to be together, and we drive with that because that's our ultimate aim, drawing people together.
Do you have anything to say, Theresa, to that? Because I know you had a concern
Yeah.
also in mind.
Well, I'll say that the concern part is the small pool of people that do become reclusive, right? But that's a very small portion. And so, but I love live concerts, probably Taylor Swift. I don't want to sit in the balcony in the sweet spot. I want to sit on the floor, feel my chest bumping from the music, be a little sweaty, scream, maybe catch a drumstick. I don't know. So I think that so many people, experience has come back in such a big way after the pandemic, to Andrew's point, that it's not going away.
So thank you, both of you. I think it's been a very insightful conversation. And what I think we can learn is that while data has immense possibilities and technology gives you access to so much more than you could ever have with human resources alone, there are also some concerns at play here of bias, of authorship, of how human creativity and design thinking must evolve and adapt. But I think one thing is fairly certain today is that technology is going to change the nature of the game completely. It's going to change architectural culture, architectural process, practice. And as architects and as designers, we need to rethink and sort of reimagine what our role is in this new process, what practice must mean, can mean. And I think if we start from that fundamental thing of problem solving, that as architects and as designers, our job is to problem solve. The tools might evolve, the tools might adapt, the tools might come and go. But we're still working with people, whether it's on the client end, whether it's with the teams at our disposal. All you're doing is helping them find growth in their lives and helping solve some challenges that the world is facing, that the client has, or some aspirations that we're tapping into. And that should be the thread that sort of takes us forward in our future. So thank you so much, both of you, again, for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah.